So I do not recall exactly. I am so overburdened with shiurim, and I thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu profoundly every moment. And daven moidala ova v'tzoyek ala osed, we should be able to keep it up. So I don't recall exactly where we ended last week, what we achieved, but more or less, I'm sure that whatever we say today will be, hopefully interesting, fascinating. So we're dealing with Birchas HaTorah. And there are two fundamental questions. When I tuned in, I just heard Reb Shlomo a few moments, hefsek. So last week, we learned Sifyud Aleph and Sifyud Weiss. The opinion of the Rosh. Birchas HaTorah depends on hefsek. And if you slept shinas kva, which is a half hour, in the middle of the day, in the afternoon, you need to say Birchas HaTorah again. But the minig is not to. And why not? So the Mechaber says, Shinas kva b'yoim have a hefsek. V'yesh oimer d'lo hefsek. V'kach nahagu. So whenever the Shulchan Aruch brings two opinions, yesh oimer d'have hefsek, yesh oimer d'lo have hefsek, we know that the halacha is in accordance to opinion number one. So why is the minhag like opinion number two? Let's have a look in the Beis Yosef. So here we are.
Pesach, you got to keep on going. So to get till you get to where the Rav is quoting the two minhagim, the Shitas.
Sif Yud Aleph. Sif Yud Aleph.
A little faster.
Down.
One more. There we go.
Shinas kva b'yoyim al mitoseh havi hefsek. Yesh oimin d'lo have hefsek v'chei nahagu. Why is that? I assume we can have the Beis Yosef on our screen. And this is an extremely important Beis Yosef towards the end of Siman Mem Zayin. It's towards the end of Siman Mem Zayin. Reb Shlomo, do we have Yosef?
Let's see if it was on last week's Rav's Mar Mekaimis. Can you check to see last week's Mar Mekaimis if it was there?
I do not think it was in my Mar Mekaimis.
Okay, so then we'll have to call it up. Call it up. It'll take a second.
Siman Mem Zayin. Here we are. Wonderful. So towards the end of Siman Mem Zayin, I will focus exactly where it is. Dibur Maschel ve'im Yoshan. Here we are. No, down.
Keep on going, Pesach. Here we go.
Ve'im Yoshan kosav adoni ovi arosh. Where is that? No, down. Ve'im Yoshan.
No, you passed it, Pesach. You had it. You passed it.
Up. Scroll up.
No. You're going the wrong way.
Go slowly. Go down slowly.
Why don't you just put in the words Ve'im Yashan Pesach, and you called it up a moment ago. Ve'im Yashan. Further. No. Further. It starts with the words Ve'im Yashan. Further.
It's a new paragraph starting
right there, right, freeze. There we are.
Here we are. ואם יושן כוסף עדיין יורי, בתשובה, שעה ביום, אם יושן שינס כמה, צריך לברך, וגם בפסוקים כוסף כן. וכוסף הגוס מימוניוס, ושם רבנו שמחה, ששנה ומרחס מפסיקין, אם בוא ללמד אחריהם סורח ובורך. And the Yosef says, maybe not, but shinas kva is definitely a hefsek. You go to the bathroom, it's not a hefsek, but shinas kva is definitely a hefsek. Now, kosav oid ha'ogur, 4 lines down in the same paragraph. But kosav oid ha'ogur, no, 2 lines down.
2 lines down, Pesach, 2 lines down.
Here we are. because of oida oga, she'oviv hinig shalom avorach b'yoyim, afילו אחר שנזכבה, וכן ראוי לעשות, כי המקל בברוכס במוקם שיש מחלקס, הרי זה לא הפסיד, כי הברוכס אינן מעכבות. ויש לתמוע, the basis of wonders, דו בין הראש, בין רבנו שמחה, בין הרם שינה בהפסק, ולא חזינן מן דפלג עליהו. ואם כן, איך הנהג האב בלא כמן, והבן ייפה כוח אוהב, משום שיש מחלוקס בדבר, וענן לא אשכחן מן דפלג בו. We don't find who disagrees with the Rosh that Shinas Kva is a hefsek. Now, the Beisesa comes up with a spark of genius. Ve'efsha, sheta'amam, mishum derabbeinu tam, afilu Shinas kol halayla lo have a hefsek, כמו שכתוב בסמוך, ואף על פי שאין הלכה כמויסר מפני שכל הפוסקים חייבים עליו, היינו בשינס לילה, אבל בשינס יומי הוא יש לוחש לדבריו, וכן נוהגנו עולם, שלא לברך ביום אפילו אחר שינס כבר. What is Rabbeinu Tam about? Now, first of all, I want to say, this is a very uncommon phenomenon. That the Yosef says, we disagree, we reject, we ignore Rabbeinu Tam. Wow. Rabbeinu Tam was the greatest of all Balei HaTosfos. First and foremost amongst the Rashi's great Talmidim. Rabbeinu Tam is unique. What the Rambam was for Sephardi Jewry, Rabbeinu Tam was for Ashkenazi Jewry, and he was number 2 after Rashi. So the Yosef says, according to Rabbeinu Tam, in the morning, even though you did not sleep, if you didn't sleep in the morning, you need to say a bracha. Where is the Rabbeinu Tam? We scroll down. It's very close. Hamashkim beboike. Here we are. Ois Yud Gimel. והמשכם בבוקר ללמוד קודם שילך לבית הכנסת, יש לו לבורך ברכס HaTorah. We're dealing with a person that gets up very early in the morning, before the Alois. Gets up in the morning very early. And he's not going to shul yet. יש לו לבורך ברכס HaTorah. כך כוסם הראש בסוף פרק כמה דברוכס. וגם בשיעור שכוסם רבינו בסומך לכמן. אבל המרדכי כוסף בשם שהמהר"ם אומר שאין הצורך לבורך, שברכס HaTorah שלס מפוטס עד שחס. וכך כוסף רבינו יוינה, והטויסס כוסף כן בשם רבינו תם. וכוסף הוא דלא נהירה. And the Trumas edition says, he and his uncle היו נוהגים לבורך. גם האוגה כוסף של רבינו תם מיוחד בדובר זה, וכל הפוסקים באוהלים שיש לבורך וכן נוהגים לבורך. What is the question? What is the question? Person goes to sleep 9 o'clock by night. After a good night's sleep, he gets up 4 o'clock in the morning. Does he need to say Birchas HaTorah? Why not? That was a hefsek gomor. He slept a good night's sleep. Rabbeinu Tam says, no, he doesn't say Birchas HaTorah till he goes to shul. And that is the Rabbeinu Tam I mentioned last week. Now we see the source. Rabbeinu Tam says, Birchas HaTorah is just like Birchas HaShachar. It has nothing to do with sleeping every day in the morning. Just like you say 15 brochas Birchas HaShachar, you say Birchas HaTorah. And it doesn't depend when you get up in the morning. Shinas Kva Balayla, everybody agrees it's a Hefsek Gomer. Rabbeinu Tam says Birchas HaTorah has nothing to do with Hefsek. It has to do with your routine, your daily routine. And therefore, before Alois Shachar, even after Alois Shachar, before the nights, you don't say Birchas HaTorah. It has nothing to do with Hefsek. Says the Beis Yosef, according to Rabbeinu Tam, you should not say a brocha in the afternoon because it has nothing to do with Hefsek. And even Shinas Lailo is not a Hefsek. However, Rabbeinu Tam yochid v'dover v'kol ha'poiskim oimrim sheyesh lavorach v'chein nagim u'olam. So on one hand, the minig olam is when you get up early in the morning, you say Birchas HaTorah. So it's not accordance to Rabbeinu Tam. But on the other hand, Shinas Kva b'yoyim v'choishish to Rabbeinu Tam. So the Beis Yosef comes up with a powerful argument, and he says, Shinas Kva Balayla, everybody agrees it's a Hefsek Gomer. Shinas Kva B'yoyim, maybe not. Because an afternoon nap is not really what you need, the sleep you need. The sleep you need is a good night's sleep. And this brings us back to Sif Yud Aleph. Shinas Kva B'yoyim have a Hefsek. Because the halach is in accordance to the Rosh, and that is the opinion of most Rishonim. Yesh oimrim de lo have hefsek, that is based on Rabbeinu Tam, v'chein nahagu, and that is the Ogo. The Ogo says, my father said, you don't make a brocha after Shinas Kva b'yoyim. And that is because Safek Lokal, v'choishish to Rabbeinu Tam. So why do we say a brocha 4 o'clock in the morning if you're choishish to Rabbeinu Tam? So the Beis Yosef says there's a difference between Shinas Kva Balayla and Shinas Kva B'yoyim. They are not the same. Shinas Kva B'yoyim, we don't say a brocha because according to Rabbeinu Tam you don't. Shinas Kva Balayla, the minig is yes to say a brocha, even though according to Rabbeinu Tam, you say Birchas HaTorah only when you go to Shiur after the nights. In this count, we do not agree with Rabbeinu Tam. Shinas Kva Balayla is a hefsek, which is a bit strange, because the fundamental question is not whether it is a hefsek, but whether hefsek is relevant. And according to Rabbeinu Tam, it's not about hefsek. So we rely partially on Rabbeinu Tam, which is somewhat of a chiddush. The other question I think we discussed last week, what is the essence of Birchas HaTorah? Is it a brocha on the mitzvah of Talmud Torah? Or like the Briskerov quotes of Chaim, the chefza of Torah? And I want once again to have a look in the Beis Yosef, and this time the beginning of Siman Mem Zayin, not towards the end. If we could go back to the Beis Yosef in the beginning of Siman Mem Zayin. And the question the Beis Yosef deals with is two different opinions. What at the beginning? We need to scroll up. Dibur HaMaschil, Zu Nuscha. Zu Nusacha. So let's scroll down and look for the words Zu Nucha. So just a minute. Okay. Zu Nusacha. Here we are. And we're dealing with first bracha, the very first bracha. Shekadosh Rabbeinu Mezayis v'tzivono al divrei Torah poshetu, because of a Rosh. V'yesh makoyim she'omrim la'asoik b'divrei Torah. I don't know whether you all are aware, Sephardim say al divrei Torah. Ashkenazim always follow the Rosh. Yesh makoyim she'omrim la'asoik b'divrei Torah. B'nei yoyna kosav she'benuschoot meduyakot motzu al divrei Torah. Because of Reb David Abu Daram, sheyoyse nochen moimer al divrei Torah lefishu koyre leisek haTorah v'asiyas hamitzvos. Oh, so the Abu Daram says, if you say Hashikadosh b'mitzvos v'tzivono al divrei Torah would refer to the entirety of Torah, which is learning Torah and observing Taryag mitzvahs. Now, why do we need to say a bracha on mitzvahs if we have a separate concept of Birchas a mitzvah? And when you make a mitzvah, you do a mitzvah, you say a bracha. Because there are so many mitzvahs in which you do not say a bracha. Notably, Kriya Shema Shachas v'Shalarvis. Kriya Shema is a mitzvah d'oraisa, but we don't say Asher Kedushono b'Mitzoyse v'Tzivono l'Kroat HaShema. You give tzedakah, you don't say a bracha. Kibbud Av V'Em, you don't say a bracha. So according to Abu Darham, the Birchas HaMitzvah every morning, Asher Kedushono b'Mitzoyse v'Tzivono al Divrei Torah, includes learning Torah and Kiyum Mitzvoiseh. According to this formula, we can say it's on the Chefza of Torah because it includes the mitzvahs, and you say a bracha on mitzvahs. Linera, the Beis Yosef says in the same paragraph, line number 5, Velinera, the Esrotchot, the Adarabah, Ma'ita Megufei Odev Tvela Vorach Lasok B'divrei Torah, שהיא ברכה מיוחדת לקריאת התורה שהוא בו לעסק בארצו ולברך על דברי תורה שכולל עשייס המצוות שאינו בו עכשיו לעשייסם ולכשיעשה מברך על כל מצווה ברכה מיוחדת. So the nusach of the Rambam is al divrei Torah, and that's why Sephardim say al divrei Torah. Ashkenazim say לעסק בדברי Torah. And it is clear from the Beis Yosef, the fundamental question is, on what are we saying the bracha? Is it exclusively on learning Torah, or is it including Kiyum Mitzvahs of Torah? So on one hand, the Beis Yosef argues, we say a separate bracha on the mitzvahs. But Abu Darham would respond, there are many mitzvahs we don't say a bracha. So I think when we deal with the Machlokes Gra and Beis Yosef, is Birchas HaTorah about the Chefz of Torah or the mitzvah of Talmud Torah? Maybe it depends on the Machlokes. What is the Nusach HaBrocha? If it's al Divrei Torah, it is on mitzvahs Talmud Torah and all the other mitzvahs. If it's Lasuk B'Divrei Torah, this Brocha refers exclusively only to learning Torah. And if that is the essence of the bracha, what the Briskerov says is more reasonable. It's on the Chefza of Talmud Torah. Now we'll have a fascinating discussion. Heishev Moshe. This was on our sheet last week, and it's on this week's sheet again, and a lengthy discussion from Minchas Osher Moyedim Chelik Yamal. Let me give you a brief introduction. Who was the Heishev Moshe? The Heishev Moshe is a sefer not very well known, but every chassid in the world knows who was the Yismach Moshe. So the Yismach Moshe was the founder of the dynasties of Sigit and Satmar. The Yismach Moshe's grandson was the Yetav Lev, Rabbi Kasir Yehuda Teichelbaum. He was the first Sigita Rebbe, Sigita Rav. The Heishev Moshe was the Yismach Moshe. He was a Rav in Uhel, and that is a city in Hungary. Thousands of people visit his gravesite every year, and the Satmar Hasidim put up an oihel on his gravesite with food 24 hours a day. I was there 2 years ago. So the Yismach Moshe in his younger years was a misnagid. His son-in-law turned him into a chassid. Well, that's an interesting story. His son-in-law was the Aryeh de Beit Eloi. He was a tremendous Eloi. And he invited his shaver to come along with him to the Chayza Lublin. And after meeting the Chayza one time, the Yismach Moshe not only became a chassid, but he was a rebbe. And he was a very close friend of the Chassam Sofer. They tremendously admired each other, even though they clashed regarding Nusach HaTfilah. Because the Yismach Moshe, like all Hasidim, switched over from Nusach Ashkenaz to Nusach Sfarad. And in Shuvas Chasam Sefer, he says that is not legitimate, and he writes a letter, a Shuvah, to the Yismach Moshe. So anyway, Heisha Moshe Shalas Shuvas and Moededik Sefer. Let's learn the first few lines. Nereli lahevi raya brura psuka v'chaluta. The lav behefsik the shin elachut al yaminta, and he brings a raya to Rabbeinu Tam, even though the Beis Yosef and Tosfos says everybody disagrees with Rabbeinu Tam. Comes along the Yismach Moshe after 700 years or 800 years after the Rishonim. Nereli lahevi raya brura psuka v'chaluta, that the Rosh is wrong and Rabbeinu Tam is right. So let me make a comment. Whenever I will meet an Achroin that argues, I have a raya brura psuka v'chaluta against one of the Rishonim, I always have this huge urge to question that raya. Do you really think so? Do you know something that the Rosh wasn't aware of? You know, Im Rishonim kemalachim, anu kivnei Adam. Im Rishonim kivnei Adam, anu kechamorim. In our Messiah, we always bow down our heads to the great Rishonim. And we always assume they were far, far wiser than we will ever be. So I apologize for using this language. I'm a great admirer of the Yismach Moshe al-Kachi Darkos of Torah. Raya brura psuka v'chaluta against the Rosh. Okay, let's examine that raya. And I have 5 different arguments why it is neither brura nor psuka nor chaluta. But let's see, what is this raya? Lav behefsek tali milsa. Do a poskim the cause of the shina behefsek kulam pe'achod rak shenas klav lo shenas aray. V'yimkein Birchas HaTorah alkinam b'brochos chalav alaf midachsiv ki shemesh shemekro hova goydel elokeinu. Umefarish Rashi ki shebo Moshe leftoyach b'divrei shira omer lehem li'sor ani avorech v'atem onu acharai omer. Vainu ki shemesh shemekro bebrocha ovu goydel elokeinu ba'amein. Medech hazinan shebirech Moshe shma min HaTorah to'in brocha. Umekan kazwa poskim de Birchas HaTorah lefoneo dioraisa. Medemetzinan lo mikro b'Torah. Varamban mana'o to lemitzvahs asay. Now, he said bebrochas gimel omid beis. We don't need to check the Gemara on Brochas. I assume we all remember. The Gemara on Brochas Gimel Omid Beis says that David HaMelech never slept shinas kra, shitin nishmin kishinas asus, and he used to get up every day b'chatzois laila, and his harp was on top of his bed, and the wind played his harp. That was his alarm clock. And he got up at Chetzois and said, Shiras v'tishbuchis ad alois hashachar. The Yismach Moshe assumes, because Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest individual ever to walk the face of earth, and that is clear in Bavli and Yerushalmi and all Midrash Chazal, and actually the Torah says, like come Novi ke Moshe va'achrov lo yiyeh. The Rambam writes, Moshe Rabbeinu hayo av lenaviyim lekodbem lefanav u'leboim acharav. So we should assume that every Midas Chasidus we find by any of the giants of yore, all the Gedolim and all the Tzaddikim, whatever Midas Chasidus they had, Moshe Rabbeinu had as well. So if David HaMelech never slept the Shinas Kra, then probably Moshe Rabbeinu never slept the Shinas Kra. Ki shemesh shem ekro, is at the end of Torah's Moshe, that is Arvois Moav. But Moshe Rabbeinu definitely made Birchas HaTorah by Har Sinai, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu started teaching him Torah. And if he never slept a Shinas Kva, then he only said Birchas HaTorah once in his lifetime, because he never slept a Shinas Kva. And if, according to the Rosh, if you don't sleep a Shinas Kva, you never mechuyev in Talmud Torah. So how come in Arvis Moav, Moshe Rabbeinu suddenly says Talmud Birchas HaTorah? So this proves the Rosh isn't right, Rabbeinu Tam is right. Birchas HaTorah every day in the morning has nothing to do with Hefsek, because Moshe Rabbeinu was never mafsek. And therefore, the Rosh isn't right. And let me ask some fundamental questions. So according to this Cheshbon, David HaMelech never said Birchas HaTorah, right? Because if he never slept the Shinas Kva, so David HaMelech never said Birchas HaTorah, only once in his lifetime, maybe. To me, it seems strange, but maybe. I don't have any source that he did say Birchas HaTorah in the morning. However, Minchas Osher. I think you got this today, Minchas Osher Moedim. Here we are. We're not going to go to Fi HaSeder. Scroll down. The fourth column. Here we are. Ube'emes nistapakti, the top of the fourth column. Nistapakti ma'oidi b'mi sheloi me'toira kol shnas shinosoi. כמו שהעידו בני הגרוע על אביהם בהקדומה לפי הגרוע על שולחן אורך החיים.
Do you hear this?
I would suggest, if it's not much of a tercha, if we could have Shulchan Aruch HaChaim Chelek Aleph, the introduction, the children of the Gra. But first, let's learn the Minchas Osher, and then we'll check the source. The children of the Gra write about their father. And this is one of the four important documents. One of the
people know how to find the show the Kloibar to tell the screen shares what we're looking for. In the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, there's a Hakdama written by the Bnei Hagra on the Bir Hagra of the Shulchan Aruch. You need to find I don't remember if it's in the Lemberg, probably is, but you need to find a reasonably good print of the Shulchan Aruch.
If we don't, it's not essential. You could rely on the Minchas Osher. So the children of the Gra write that he never slept a Shinas Kva, and while he was sleeping, Rechushe Merachshen Sefosa V'Alochas V'Agodas. When you listened carefully, you realize that while the Gaon was sleeping, his lips were moving, and he was quoting Alochas V'Agodas. Would that be considered a hefsek? Is sleeping a hefsek if while you're sleeping, you're learning Torah? I'm getting up from my chair a moment. I want to fetch a Shulchan Aruch HaChaim and look for that introduction. Just one moment.
Anybody who can put it up first will be helpful.
Okay, I have it. Here we are. Amazing. Here we are. Scroll down. Dibra Maschal V'Teida. Let's scroll down. Not too fast. We're looking for Dibra Maschal for a paragraph starting. Here we are. V'Teida, though. Here we are. V'Teida V'Taskel Yedid Yokor. Ki Yerosoi V'Terosoi. B'Shiur Nimratz Yosem Mamash She'anu V'Lo Yehuged Lonu Achetzi. Ki Shenosem Lev. El Kol HaMaseh Masher Asam. מספי ימי חייב מתחילה ועד תראה שכולם באו בתכלס החריצס והשלמוס. קיבל על עצמו כל יום שלא לישון יותר מבייס שויס במסלס. He never slept more than 2 hours in a 24-hour cycle. That's a shenas arai. ובאויסה חוצי שו או יסף סויסוב מלאך שויס הלוחס והגודס. ככלויסה חוצי שו יש גבר קרי ויתל יודע ויתחללמת בכל רם וישן עוד פעם חוצי שו. וככה אויסה שיר שינוסה גימר מחצוס השו בלילה. An hour and a half hour by day. And when he was sleeping, rechusha malach shesvos v'loch zagodas. So the Goan never slept the Shinas Kla. I wonder, did he say Birchas HaTorah every day in the morning? Did the Goan say Birchas HaTorah once in his lifetime? That would be strange. If that was the meaning of the Goan, it would be in Masarav. Are you familiar with the Masarav? Masarav is the Sefer the Menhagim of the Goan. If the Goan didn't say Birchas HaTorah every day in the morning, that would be a shocker. That would be the most commonly quoted minig of the Goan, more than anything else. It would seem so strange that the Goan never said Birchas HaTorah, because he never slept the Shinas Kva. And I wonder, would that be considered the hefsek if he's learning all night? I don't know. It depends. If Birchas HaTorah is on mitzvahs, Talmud Torah, when you're sleeping, you're potter. So you need to say a bracha when you get up in the morning, because when a person is asleep, he's potter mitzvahs. If it's on the chefs of Torah, like the Briskerov, he's learning. He's learning. If a person never stops learning, even when he's asleep, that wouldn't be a hefsek. So should we assume that the Goan did not say Birchas HaTorah every day in the morning? No. The Goan had so many Talmidim Gedolei Yisrael. If he didn't say Birchas HaTorah in the morning, we would know that. That would be the most famous minhag of all. And therefore, my argument is this. Shenas Kva, or even Shenas Arai, if that is your sleep, and you never sleep more than that, that is considered a hefsek. And even according to the Rosh, that only a Shenas Kva is a hefsek, that is by normal people who sometimes sleep a Shenas Kva, sometimes sleep Shenas Arai. But regarding Birchas HaTorah, everybody would agree. So many people have insomnia, and they can't really sleep by night. They have somewhat of a semi-sleep, resting. That is the way you sleep. That is a hefsek. But that is only one argument I have. The more powerful argument, and now we go back to the Minchas Osher. After we saw the Goan, we go back to the Minchas Osher. Let's go back to the Minchas Osher. And we go back to the beginning of this discussion, Weiss Aleph. First column. Uba'anye lo hivanti klal kushizu mekametam. Ve'emes nera posha diyesh lo imar. Down. Here we are. Ve'emes nera posha diyesh lo imar. Ve'afa Moshe potoroi me'Birchas HaTorah makor mokum berech lo yitzi Yisroam yidei chavoson. Halo hem hoyu chayovim be'Birchas HaTorah. Ve'Moshe berech kedei lehotzion yidei chavoson. Because in Yom Daf Lamed Zayin, from this very same posuk, Hashem Ekrov, we learn that a person needs to answer Amen. And that is why Rashi and Birchas clearly says, Moshe says a bracha to be mitzi all the others. I suggest let's go back to Birchas Chof Aleph Amid Aleph, the very source of Birchas HaTorah. So the Gemara says, where do we learn Birchas HaTorah? Moshe Rabbeinu says, Ki Shem Hashem Ekro Havu Goydel Elokeinu. Could we see Birchas Chof Aleph? It was on the screen 15 minutes ago.
It's also in the other Mar Mekaymis on page 1. If it's that easy to get, Eliezer, you can call it up. page 1.
Okay, so
page 1.
It is clear in Rashi. Moshe tells the people, I'm going to say the bracha, listen to my bracha, answer Amen, and you will be Yaitzer. Nobody said Birchas HaTorah ba'arvis Moav besides Moshe Rabbeinu. Here we are. Umar Rav Yehuda. Menayin leBirchas HaMozon Achleim, and HaTorah shenem v'achalta v'savoto. Menayin leBirchas HaTorah lefaneim, and HaTorah shenema, ki shemesh emekro, v'goy l'elokeinu. Kosav Rashi. כשבו מוישה לפתוח בדברי שירו, אומר להם לישראל, אני אבורך תחילו, ואתם ענו אחריי אמן. כי שמש הם אקרו בברוכה, אתם הובו גודל אלוקינו באמן, והוכם מפרש לו במסכת יובה. So this is clear that Moshe Rabbeinu says the brocha, and he's Moshe all the others. And it is a very well-known halacha, even though a person was already yotze, he could still be moitzi others. So even if we accept the fundamental argument of the Heisha Moshe Rabbeinu was potter, because he never had a hefsek. He's potter, but he could moitzi others. And it is clear in Rashi, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the entire people, Ki shemesh em ekro, according to Rashi, is not when I'm going to learn Torah, you say the bracha. I am going to say the bracha and you answer Amen. So what's the problem? Moshe Rabbeinu, even if we assume he was potter from Birchas HaTorah, like the Heisha Moshe argues, because he didn't sleep a shinnas kla, he's moitzi all the others. So let me tell you an interesting story. I said this here many years ago. I didn't know that the Satmar Rebbe listens to my Shiur. Somehow, this argument made its way all the way to Kiryas Yoel and Monroe, to Reb Aaron, the Satmar Rebbe Shlit, and the Satmar Rebbe, I think, is the only Rebbe today was also an active Rosh Hashiva. My Rabbi, the Kosim of the Rebbe, Zechat Tzaddik B'Kodesh L'Vracha, when we were young Bocharim, he was a Rosh Hashiva. He gave Shiurim in the yeshiva almost every day. Once a week he gave a short klurik in the entire yeshiva. And almost every day he gave a private shiur to a small group of Bocharim. And for a few years, I had the privilege to be part of that very select group. We were never more than 1 million. Sometimes we were 5 or 6 or 7. And I think the only Rebbe today who actually gives shiurim in yeshiva is the Satmar Rebbe. So anyway, so this shiur came up to the Satmar Rebbe, and he's an enik of the Yismach Moshe. Goes without saying, he wanted to be Miyashiv. His great Zaidi. So he sent me an interesting argument. And he said, Arvos was born in Arvos Moav, Bekashlu Ish Ba'achiv. The Gemara said it in Tav Chav Zayin, Bekashlu Ish Ba'avoyin Achiv, Kol Yisor Arevim Zeh Lezeh. So Kishemesh Shemekro is before Arvos. So when Moshe Rabbeinu says, Kishemesh Shemekro, that was before Arvos was given, and therefore we can't say Afar Pishiyot Samoitzi. Because Afar Pishiyot Samoitzi, Rashi and Tosfos say in Brochas Memches is based on Kol Yisor Arevim Zeh Lezeh. I answered, quoting many sources, that Arvos was also given in Har Sinai. Even though the fundamental source is Kishem is Bekoshu Ish Ba'ochiv Ba'avoynochav, as the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, but we assume Arvos goes all the way back to Oyel Moed and to Har Sinai. Just to clarify matters, Kodesh Baruch Hu gave Torah Yisrael at 3 different stages. Beginning in Har Sinai, that is when the Aseres HaDibros were given, and many other mitzvahs. Number 2, in Oyel Moed. And number 3, Arvos Moav, when they came into Eretz Yisrael, before they came into Eretz Yisrael. So there are different opinions amongst the Rishonim. Some say the entirety of Torah was given in Sinai. Oyel Moed and Arvis Moed are just Chazorah. Moshe Rabbeinu went over the fundamentals again and again and again and again. Others say that the Torah was given in 3 different stages. But I brought many sources. Arvis goes all the way back to Har Sinai, and therefore, according to Rashi, Moshe Rabbeinu says the brocha not because he's mechuyev, but to be moisi others yedei chayvasa. Going back to the Minchas Ashur, there are a few additional arguments. Ois Beis, if we go back to the Minchas Ashur, at the bottom of the first column, Ois Beis, and this is a bit poetical. Be'emes nere de lo neida klal derech nesha b'shamayim. And even though the Gemara says David HaMelech didn't sleep a Shinas Kva, maybe Moshe Rabbeinu did. We don't understand anything about the greatness, the heights of David HaMelech and Moshe Rabbeinu. But the reason the poskim say a person should avoid Shinas Kva in the afternoon is because Shino is echod meshishim memisa, and it brings some level of tuma on a person. But Moshe Rabbeinu, being the greatest of all, maybe he had no problem sleeping in Shinas Kva. What do we know? It is very well known that Zohar says a person shouldn't sleep on Rosh Hashanah. Because if you sleep on Rosh Hashanah, your mazal is going to sleep. Rabbi Chaim Vital brings that the Riyah Kodesh did sleep on Rosh Hashanah. Why? So Rabbi Chaim Vital says, when the Riyah Kodesh slept in his sleep, he was Megala Soides HaTorah that another person cannot be Machadish in 100 years. And therefore, the Riyah Kodesh sleep, he could sleep on Rosh Hashanah. The Meir Auerbach was one of the Gedolim in Poland. And what I quote now is from the second column, us based in Minchas Ashur. The Sof Yomov, he made Aliyah, and he was one of the Gedolim of Yerushalayim. And he explains an expression we find in various sources in Shas Rav Sheshes. When the Gemara asks a kasha on Rav, Rav Sheshes says, Kadnayim v'shochav Rav omer lahu milta. Rav said what he said when he was half asleep. And that seems to be degrading. Seems to be a zilzul. Rav was the greatest Amoira, the first generation of Amiram and Bavel. The Gemara says Rav is like a Tana. He could argue against the Tanoim. And his Talmud says, oh, Rav said what he said when he was sleepy. That's not B'derech Koved. The Imre Bina quotes Reb Chaim Vital, and he explains, Nigla, you need to learn when you're really awake. Nistar, Soides HaTorah, Kodesh Baruch Hu was Megalat Tzadikim in their dreams. So when the Gemara can't understand what Rav said, Rav Sheshes said, maybe this statement is based on Torah Sasod Anistar. So what I mean to argue is, what do we understand about the greatness of David HaMelech and Moshe Rabbeinu? Maybe David HaMelech couldn't afford to sleep at Shilas Arai, and Moshe Rabbeinu could. What do we know? So the Yismach Moshe was a gewaldige Gadol. Needless to say, one of the greatest tzaddikim of his era, one of the greatest gedolim. And Heshev Moshe is one of the greatest shuvas for him. But when the Yismach Moshe writes, I have a raya, Gemura, Charuta v'Psucha against the Rosh, oh, I disagree. I think the Rosh could handle. He could handle whatever you're going to throw at him. And for many different reasons, as I wrote in Minchas Ashur, one could Bidoichet Desraya, in many, many different swaras and many, many different ways. So going back to the essentials, Birchas HaTorah is one of the most important brachas. Ad kedei kach, that Chazal say in the Doron Daf Pei Aleph, Al Agudah ha'aretz, what brought about Golos Yisrael and Chorban Habayis, Al Ozva Mestirosi, Shaloi Baruchu B'Torah Techila. And the Ran explains, it wasn't just about Bitur Mitzvahs Aseh of Birchas HaTorah. Could we have an Adoram Pei Aleph or Medanaf on the screen? The Ran says, Right there, it's in
the package here. It's in the package, the other package, not the Rov's package, the other package. We have the Gemara Nedarim, the Birchas HaTorah package. Should be on page 2 or 3.
So the Gemara deals with the question: what caused Churban Habayis and Golos Yisrael? That's an Adoram Pei Aleph or a Bava Metzia Pei Hey. But I would prefer an Adoram Pei Aleph because that is where we have the Ran. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, and that's in the Navi, Almo of the Ha'aretz, Dovazeh Nishalach HaChamim, Lenaviyim.
Right here.
Mi ha'isha chochem ve'yoven ezois dover zeh nishal ha'chachomim, and that is supposed to in Yirmiyahu. The chachomim lenaviyim, and if you have a look at the gears of the Bach, the right side of the page, Malachi Ashoris, chachomim neviyim Malachi Shavarot Yeshua. They couldn't answer this question. עד שפרש הקדוש ברוך הוא ביעצמא דכסה ויאמר השם על עזר מסתירוסי, היינו שם לקיילי. אומר וידע, שאין מבורכן בתורה תחילה. קוסם הר"ן, שאין מבורכן בתורה תחילה, תחילה לעשותכם בכל יום, דהיינו לעסוק בדברי תורה, והרבנו, ואשר בוחר בנו, דוב זה נשל החכמים. מצוסי במגיל סתורם של רבני יונה. And that's an interesting source. We don't know what that Megillah Stolam of Rabbeinu Yonah is. Al Shalei Boche B'Torah Tchila of the Oretz, the Emi Salos and Teros Kipashti, Roi Oiskim Okshinachomem, Lama Lo Pershu. Vadei Oiskim Roi B'Torah Tomid, Ulefich Roi Chachomem V'Naviyem Tameim, Almu of the Oretz. Ad Shepeshach Oshbocho, Sheyudea Mamakei Aleiv, Shaloi Mabochem Tchila Kloime, Shaloi הויסו התורה חשובה בעיניהם כל כך, שיהיה ראוי לבורך עליהם, שלא היו עוסקים בו לשמו, ומתוך כך הוא ימזלזלם בברכוסה. אלה דברי החסיד, והם נועים וראויים למי שאמורם. Let me add on my thought. Why do Chazal emphasize שלא בורכו בתורה תחילו? Why don't they simply say שלא בורכו בתורה? The Or Zerua has a fundamental question. There are only 2 brachas that are min HaTorah, Birchas Hamazon and Birchas HaTorah. Why does Birchas Hamazon come after you eat and Birchas HaTorah comes before you learn? If there are only 2 brachas that are min HaTorah, we would expect them to have the same fundamental rules. Either both should be before or both should be after. Why is Birchas HaTorah before and Birchas Hamazon after? I don't recall who, but one of the Rishonim says, Birchas Hamazon is ala noas haguf. Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't want to be full of joy. We're going to eat. You were hungry. Now you ate. You're satisfied. Now is the time to say thank you. But Birchas HaTorah, just walking into the Besmedish, taking your Gemara into your hand, you need to be so overwhelmed with joy. What a schus, what a privilege it is to be able to learn Torah. This bracha you need to say before you learn, not after you finish learning. So maybe the emphasis is Shalai Baruch Hu b'Torah techila. To them, Torah was like eating. It was like food. We need to learn. We need to eat. We need to drink. They didn't appreciate what Torah means in our lives. They didn't appreciate that Torah is the oxygen you breathe. Maybe they said Birchas HaTorah, but they say it la'achar Talmud, just like Birchas HaMazon comes after eating. And that is the Hadgasha, the emphasis, Shalei Baruch Hu b'Torah techila. And that is a supplement to what the Ran quotes from Rabbeinu Yonah. They learned, but the Torah wasn't enough precious to them. They didn't appreciate what Torah means in the life of every individual, in the life of every community, every kehillah. Torah is oxygen, Torah is life, and therefore they didn't say Birchas HaTorah before started learning, and that proves that they didn't appreciate Torah enough, and that caused Chorma Bayis v'Kol Yisrael. So every day in the morning when you say Birchas HaTorah, bear in mind how important this bracha is, and really say Birchas HaTorah b'Kavod HaRabba. It was a pleasure, like every week. Kol Tov, Rabbi Say. We'll see you next week. No, next week.
Just Shilev, if I may add.
Yeah.
So the Rav said that Arvis goes back all the way.
Yeah.
Maybe that answers the question one of the Ilam had here. When the Gemara learns Birchas HaTorah from Kishem Hashem Ekra, which said L'chayra before Parshas Hazinu. What did Moshe Rabbeinu make Birchas HaTorah according to the Pashup Pshat and Gemara on all the other things before Parshas Hazinu? L'chayra he did. Why is this Kishem Hashem Ekra all the way at the end of the Torah? Should have been whenever he taught Torah to Klal Yisrael. Is the same svar as the Rav that Arvis goes back, so it's Pashup that Birchas HaTorah goes back also?
Probably, but Mitzvahs HaTorah, as I mentioned before, it is clear when we learn Chumash that Nesinas HaTorah are three different stages. Parshas Yisro and Chumash Shemois is Ma'amad Har Sinai. What we find there is a Seres HaDibros. We find a Seres HaDibros again in Parshas V'Schanim. Chumash Bamidbar is primarily about Oyel Moed and mitzvahs that were given in Oyel Moed. Oyel Moed is the Mishkan Shebamidbar. And then, towards the end of Torah, we find Arvis Moed. Mishnah Torah was an Arvis Moed. And there are two different opinions in the Rishonim. Was the entirety of Torah given in Sinai, and Oyel Moed and Arvis Moed are just Chazorah, re-emphasizing the fundamentals, or was the Torah actually given in three different stages? But the fact that we find Kishem and Shem Ekra in Mishnah Torah does not mean that Birchas HaTorah was not given before that. L'cha'oira, most of the Rishonim say Har Sinai was the entirety of Torah. And the Yerushalmi says that on the Luchas Ha'edis, between one Dibra and the other, all the rest was written. And in the Avonim, that Moshe Rabbeinu, the Yeshua ben Nun wrote, and when they came into Eretz Yisrael, Chazal say in Masechet Soita there was all the Taryag Mitzvah Shebet Torah. So this is a good question, but we don't have a definitive answer why we find the mitzvah of Birchas HaTorah only towards the end of Torah's Moshe. But the Yismach Moshe definitely assumed that Moshe Rabbeinu said Birchas HaTorah all the way back in Har Sinai, and that is why he asks if he never slept the Shinas Kva, then he never had a hefsek. So the Shitosoi, I say what I say to be Miyashav Shittas Harosh.